And at the end of Parshat Shlach Lecha, which dealt with the spies, for no apparent reason, the Zohar begins to discuss a subject which took place in Exodus, Leidat Moshe, the birth of Moses. Well, why would the Zohar suddenly present to us the story of Moses, his birth, how it happened? And I'm referring to page 119 of the Parsha of Shlach Lecha, and I quote, Kol Nevi'im and Nevi'im, and I read it in Hebrew very pointedly because we know that the power of the Hebrew alphabet, more specifically the Zohar, motivates within us the potential dormant, unfortunately, cosmic consciousness, which is within the minds of all of us, except for many of us, we are not constantly aware of this great potential that is within all of us. So we read the Zohar, and that immediately opens up the door to this internal computer that is called cosmic consciousness of the human being. And it says, Kol Nevi'im and Nevi'im shakadosh baruch hu hekim liYisrael, of all the prophets that the Almighty brought up for Israel, Kulam nigaleh hakadosh baruch hu alehem b'madregot elyonot kedoshot. To all of these people was revealed upper supernal holy matters. V'ra'u ziv yakar hakadosh shel hamelach mimakom elyon. And all of these people saw the stream of light that emanated from the celestial region. And while all of them achieved that kind of cosmic connection, lo karov kemoshe, no one was as close as Moses. Shehaya karov lemelech yoter mikulam, ki chelko haya musha yoter mikol bnei alam. Why? And he was far above, meaning he had achieved the highest level of consciousness of any human being. Mipnei shekatuv alav pe el pe adaber bo umare velo bechidot. I spoke with Moses face to face, mouth to mouth. However, b'shar hanavim hayu ro'im mimakom rachok. They did not perceive that same state of consciousness, but rather from the distance. This is the introduction to the birth of Moses. And I don't want to repeat the story, which is again repeated here for us in the Zohar, but for those of you, you can refer back to Exodus, beginning of Exodus, chapter 2, where much of this is described. Now, what I'd like to touch upon, and it is not coincidental, that this portion that I'm going to read relates very much to the matter that, or let's say the cosmic event that is now present in our midst. It says, "Vatitzpaneo gimel yerachim," that she hid, meaning Moses' mother, hid Moses for 3 months. And I've already explained what does it mean she hid Moses for 3 months, because the Egyptians were such a high spiritual, while it might have been negative, but nevertheless they were so highly spiritually connected that they could perceive how long a child was in its mother's womb. And inasmuch as the prophets of Egypt knew that a Messiah was soon going to be born, and therefore there was a decree that all male child's born were to be put to death. And so whenever they discovered a woman that was pregnant, they could perceive when she would be giving birth, meaning the end of the 9 months, and then they would come and take the child away. And so here it says that Moses, the commentaries say Moses was born 3 months before, and therefore she hid him for those 3 months. They did not expect Moses to arrive until 3 months later. And here the Zohar interprets these 3 months as concealed months. Concealed months. Not to take the literal, take the story in a literal sense, meaning she had hid him 3 months, but rather these 3 months, or there are 3 months of a concealed nature. Eluhem Gimel Yerachim Shedin Kasher Shoreh Ba'olam. There are 3 months within every calendar year that din kasher, meaning extreme judgment, extreme negativity, reigns throughout the universe. Umahim Tammuz, Av, V'Tevet. Tammuz, Av, V'Tevet. These 3 months, as we are now in the month of Tammuz. In fact, we have entered the period of 3 weeks, meaning the Yemei Mitzarim, which we have already explained elsewhere. And therefore, it is called, the reference of being concealed, meaning the light, which is positive, was concealed and is concealed during these 3 months. So what is the significance of informing us about 3 negative months in relation to Moses? I mean, if the Bible wished to inform us that there are 3 negative months and that we must be careful during these 3 months, you shouldn't undertake something, generally speaking, within these 3 months, meaning, again, the Hebrew months of Tammuz, Av, and Elul. Why is it connected? Or why does the Zohar feel that this aspect of 3 months is somehow closely related to Moses? And so he concludes, before Moses descended to this world, he was above. And because he was always in an elevated level of consciousness, the Shekhinah immediately descended with him at the very moment at the time of birth. V'shamra oto. And the Shekhinah constantly protected him. Mikan amar Rabbi Shimon. Sheharuchot shel tzadikim nimsaim lamala miterem she'ardu le'olam. And therefore, the spirit of tzaddikim are always connected, before they even descend, are immediately connected with the upper spirits, and therefore when they descend along with those spirits. These 3 months also are symbolic in as much as they are connected to 3 distinct periods concerning the Holy Temple. The month of Tevet, or Asara B'Tevet, the 10th day in the month of Tevet, the outer wall of Jerusalem was pierced, meaning the Romans entered, they pierced the wall and entered the city of Jerusalem on the 10th day of Tevet. Tammuz, the 7th day of Tammuz, was the time when they pierced the wall around the temple. And 21 days later, in the month of Av, they destroyed the temple. These 3 days, or these 3 months, are for us, as we understand the cosmos, months that triggered or initiated what happened. In other words, it was not by coincidence that the wall should be pierced around the city in Tibet, or the wall around the holy temple was pierced in Tammuz, or Av, the temple was destroyed, because these are 3 negative months. And consequently, this is what took place. And because the Zohar says that Moses never died, and we have discussed this also previously, he never died. In other words, he is as present as we have already discussed concerning the Holy Temple, that the Holy Temple was never destroyed. That it is only for those who live within the illusion, what we call the illusion, the non-reality state, that do not perceive the Holy Temple, cannot see it, and are under the impression, and I must say most Jews are really under the impression that the Holy Temple does not exist. For those who have visited Jerusalem, pray at the Wailing Wall, and it is called the Wailing Wall, but from a Kabbalistic point of view, it is called Wailing Wall because the Jews are wailing and cannot see the temple.
What does wailing mean?
What's that?
What does wailing mean?
Crying. And so...
Crying.
Crying.
Why are we calling it kotel in Hebrew?
What's that?
It's a wall.
Kotel is a wall.
And wailing?
What's that?
And what is wailing?
Crying.
Crying.
Why is it 2 different meanings?
It's the Western.
Well, it's called the Wailing Wall, and yet we call in Hebrew it's called Kotel HaMaravi. There is no wailing connected with it. It's called the Kotel HaMaravi. But it has taken on a new significance because for 2,000 years Jews have come there to crying because of the destruction and so forth. And yet, from the point of view of the Zohar, the temple was never destroyed. It still exists. And so maybe it's become symbolic as a wailing wall. That is, the wall is crying because nobody can see the temple. That might be a proper definition of the wailing wall. Now, I know this is completely contrary to the common understanding of the temple. And the Zohar says, and therefore he relates these 3 months, that it is only for those who can connect to Moshe, only those who can connect to Moshe, that can achieve this connection with Moshe, who is present and also didn't die, and overcome, and only then overcome, because Moshe, says the Zohar, or the Bishimon, never fell under the influence of the illusionary state. Never. Because that which he had experienced before birth, and there is a tradition that before the brit of a child, there is a Friday night, a little ceremony, which is to commemorate, we'll put it that way, because I don't want to touch on, one day we will touch on the aspect of brit, of circumcision, but right now it is to commemorate the aspect that this little child, who was full of cosmic awareness and cosmic intelligence and cosmic knowledge, received a kind of little pinch here in the lip. This is again all tradition, and so the child has forgotten, and so there is a kind of avelut that is celebrated at that moment. This is tradition. This is tradition. But for someone like Moses or other tzaddikim, and that's why it says Aral Sifatayim, I guess Moses didn't have that, and that's what it means at Al Sifis time. Did it mean that he couldn't speak? When Moses, you recall, we just touched on it, not completely, when the Lord told Moses, you will be the leader of Israel and you will represent Israel, and he says, but how can I cannot speak. And what does the Lord tell Moses? The one who gives speech. I mean, can't I, let's say, from a very simple, literal translation of the verse, couldn't the Lord heal Moses so that he could speak? Well, I mean, why was Moses questioning his ability if once the Lord had told him, you're going to represent the nation of Israel, you will speak for the nation of Israel, why would he then have some doubts as to his ability to convey the message of the Lord? And the answer is very simple, because we are not discussing here someone who is tongue-tied and can't express himself. It would be a total corruption almost to consider the verse as having that kind of implication. But rather what it meant was that because Moses, in his connection with like all children before birth, Moses retained that cosmic awareness even after birth. And Moses' question was not that I could not translate or impart the message of the Lord, but rather that inasmuch as I'm on another level of consciousness, another level of awareness, it would almost be that when I'm speaking to these Jews, we would not be connecting on the same wavelength. And the Lord's response was, and this is very logical, that despite the fact that you are of an upper elevated state of consciousness, and the Jew is of a lower state of consciousness, however, I could make those two levels of consciousness meet with each other. But it was nothing to do with a physical deformity that existed within Moses. This was Moses, because Moses, says the Zohar, brought with him the reality, the nature of reality, without the illusionary reality that, unfortunately, for most Jews, we are faced with. And therefore, when it comes to these 3 months in particular, Tammuz, Av, and Tevet, if we can implore and make our connection with Moses, who is alive, inasmuch as these 3 negative months, through a mystical connection, seem to relate to Moses for the only reason to tell us, and this is what the Zohar is implying, that Leidat Moshe, the birth of Moses, what does that mean, the birth of Moses? That he retained that level of consciousness, that no matter what would happen on an illusionary level of Tammuz, Av, and Tevet, the Jew, if he knows how, and we do know how, during these 3 weeks, for those of you who have listened to the tape, the Ari has provided us with the connection by which we can rise above this din kasher, this negative cosmic influence that prevails during these 3 months. Because those three months that are that negative can be overcome if we can make that proper connection with Moses, and that connection is made through the 3 secret names of Tadhat, Kuzu, and Mitzpetz.